When people think of umpiring, they think of ejections. They think of screaming, swearing, face stealing, and grenade tossing. There are certainly a lot of infamous moments out there, but in reality, these encounters are extremely rare, especially the further we get from professional baseball. At the high school level, ejections are uncommon, and that's undoubtedly in the best interest of the game and the educational experience we intend to create for the student athletes. That said, sometimes there are heated moments, and we need to be prepared as umpires to rise to the occasion. So, in this 2-episode series, we're going to focus in on sportsmanship and ejections. In the first video, we'll dive into the rules and penalties that apply to unsportsmanlike behavior. And then in video 2, we'll look at the 5-step process that umpires should use when things are moving towards an ejection. Hey everyone, I'm Patrick Faerber with GHSA Baseball Umpire Development and Umpire Classroom, where we help umpires develop their knowledge and skills. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can find more umpire training videos and courses at umpireclassroom.com. To start, let's recap the authority we have as umpires in Rule 10-1-1. Any umpire has the authority to order a player, coach, or team attendant to do or refrain from doing anything that affects the administration of these rules and to enforce prescribed penalties. Now, that gives us a lot of power as umpires, but to understand when exactly we have those powers, let's look at Rule 10-1-2. Umpire jurisdiction begins upon the umpires arriving at the field within the confines of the field and ends when the umpires leave the playing field at the conclusion of the game. So, looking at these two rules in the context of sportsmanship, we can levy penalties against any bad actors from when we walk on the field to when we walk off the field. And this means in that time period, all 5 steps to an ejection are in play to be utilized. Now, real quickly, let's look at a definition that often gets skipped, but is very relevant to this discussion. Rule 2-27. A penalty is the action taken by the umpire against a player, coach, or team for a rule infraction. Penalties include A, restricting the coach to the dugout, B, ejecting an offending player or coach. This is interesting for 2 reasons. The first is that it mentions we have the ability to restrict a coach, but doesn't include that we can restrict a player. However, this leads to the second point that in the next line, it clarifies we can eject players and coaches. So they felt they were separate enough that it had to be clearly defined in the second point, meaning the intent of the first point was that restrictions only apply to the coaches. Now, it is true that early in Rule 3-1, we're told that an illegal substitute, when discovered, is restricted to the dugout. But this is not listed as a penalty, instead it's more just given as a fact. So here's what I want y'all to take away from this. The NFHS doesn't want players ejected, which may carry an automatic suspension, for mistakes made by their coaches and potentially the umpires. So the restricted status given here is more of a form of warning to the coach and the player that the player in no way can participate in this game. And if they come on the field illegally again, they're going to be ejected. So just remember, we can restrict coaches for 3-3-1 violations, but not players. For this video, we're only going to look at Rule 3-1-1F, which is specific to sportsmanship violations and ultimately where the most entertaining YouTube ejections come from. So let's look at the rule. A coach, player, substitute, attendant, or other bench personnel shall not F. Commit any unsportsmanlike act to include, but not limited to 1. Use of words or actions to incite or attempt to incite spectator demonstrations. 2. Use of profanity, intimidation tactics, remarks reflecting unfavorably upon another person, or taunting or baiting. The NFHS disapproves of any form of taunting. 3. Use of any language intended to intimidate. 4. Behavior in any manner not in accordance with the spirit of fair play. 5. Being in live ball territory, excluding a team's bullpen area, during the opponent's infield practice prior to the start of the game. 6. Any member of the coaching staff who is not the head coach or designee in 3-2-4, leaving the vicinity of the dugout or coaching box to dispute a judgment call by an umpire. 7. Confronting or directing unsportsmanlike conduct to the umpires after the game is concluded and until the umpires have departed the game site. Okay, so that was a lot, and even then, it's not an exhaustive list. But let's not get too caught up in that right now, because we need to dive into the penalty that goes with the rule And we're going to break that penalty down line by line. The umpire shall warn the offender unless the offense is judged to be major, in which case an ejection shall occur. The NFHS would really like umpires to use the warning ability given to them to prevent as many ejections as possible. But that doesn't mean they automatically get one. If they cross a certain line, they can be ejected immediately. But again, if you can warn, they'd really like you to try to do that. A warning may be verbal or written. That warning that you're required to give for a minor offense can be verbal or written. This does not mean you can give a written warning to a player, which would restrict them to the dugout. What it is driving at is that the warning you are required to give in the previous sentence does not have to be written, and a verbal warning meets the requirements needed for ejecting over a non-major offense. Let's continue. If written, the offender shall be restricted to the bench dugout for the remainder of the game. So a written warning is where we have a dugout restriction. Note that this is required to be recorded by you and most likely reported back to your association or assigner. And what you need to report is given to us in the casebook in play 3.3.1 situation N. The umpire should notate on the umpire's copy of the team's lineup card the coach's name, the point in the game of the warning, inning, number of outs, and location of runners, and the reason for the warning. Now, moving forward, the penalty gets very repetitive and confusing, so let me summarize. The next two sentences just tell you that if the offenses by a coach are minor, they go in the order of verbal warning, dugout restriction, and ejection. Even if it's just a small offense, if they keep doing it, the penalty gets worse each time. Then it tells us again, any offense judged to be major in nature shall result in an immediate ejection. They just repeated what they already told us. Moving on, it again tells us that for all these violations, the offender can be given a verbal warning, written warning, or be ejected. Now, there are some interesting parts at the end of this penalty. For violations of F6, which is the rule of coaching staff outside of the head coach leaving their position to dispute a call, both the head coach and offending coach shall receive a written warning and be restricted to the dugout for the remainder of the game unless the offense is so severe the umpire may eject the offender and still restrict or eject the head coach. So most umpires didn't know this in our quiz, but you actually get to put the assistant and the head coach in the dugout for this violation. Finally, the rule ends by giving you that a penalty for the team berating you after you leave the field is solely up to the state association, and you cannot eject after you exit the field. Now, that does not mean it wouldn't be penalized, and most of the time, this may be more severe of a penalty than an on-field incident. So make sure that you send in a thorough report of any incidents before or after being on the field. So now that we've reviewed the rules, let's review this week's case plays, which are also available in the description. Case play number 1. Is an umpire required to give a written warning, dugout restriction, before ejecting a head coach? The correct answer here is no. By rule, if it's a major violation, we can immediately eject. We don't have to always give a verbal or written warning. Again, if it's a major violation, then it can result in an ejection. Case play number 2. F1 is removed by the head coach during the game. Following the last out of the game, F1 makes an unsportsmanlike comment to the plate umpire near home plate regarding the umpire-in-chief's strike zone. Is this A, the plate umpire can eject the player? B, the plate umpire cannot eject the player but should file a report? The correct answer here is A. Even though the game is over, because the umpire crew is still within the confines of the field, they are still able to eject for violations. So in this scenario, assuming the violation was egregious enough, then it can result in an ejection. Case play number 3. F1 is removed by the head coach during the game. Following the last out of the game, F1 berates the umpires as they leave the field heading to their vehicles. Is this A, the plate umpire can eject the player? Or B, the plate umpire cannot eject the player but should file a report? The correct answer here is B. Even though this is an egregious act that's very much unsportsmanlike, we can't eject once we leave the confines of the field. So in this scenario, you'll need to send in a game report of what happened after the game to your assigner. Case play number 4. The base umpire ejects the head coach of the offensive team. After hearing him yell a profanity regarding an out at first base, the coach immediately responds by saying it was someone in the crowd yelling, not him. The umpire-in-chief also confirms the yelling came from the crowd, not the coach. Is this A, the ejection can be reversed by the umpire-in-chief, B, the calling umpire can reverse the ejection, C, the state association can reverse the ejection, D, the ejection cannot be reversed? The correct answer here is D. Once we make an ejection, by rule, no one is able to reverse the ejection. Now, in theory, days later, maybe your state could step in and do something, but that's very unlikely. The reality that you need to be aware of is that as an on-field official, once you make an ejection, at least for as long as you're there, that ejection can't be undone. So it's important that for you, when you're leading up to an ejection, really slow down, make sure that you're going through your progressions. If there's warnings, try to get them in. Of course, if it is egregious, we will eject, but try to make it so that it's gonna look good in your report, and we're gonna make it obvious that the ejection was warranted by the behavior of this individual. Case play number 5. Which of the following are required when recording a written warning? Inning, number of outs, pitcher, location of runners, on-deck batter, where the violation was on the field. The correct answer here is innings, outs, and where the runners are. Now, the reality is that you can certainly record more information than that, and all it will be is helpful, but just know by minimum, as given to us in the case book, it's going to be innings, outs, and locations of runners. Case play number 6. After a close play is ruled out at first by U1, the assistant coach in the first base coach's box leaves his position to argue the call. The behavior outside of leaving his position is considered minor. Is this A, the assistant coach should be restricted to the dugout, B, the assistant coach and the head coach should be restricted to the dugout, C, the assistant coach should be ejected, D, the assistant coach should be ejected and the head coach should be restricted to the dugout? The correct answer here is B. When we're restricting an assistant coach to the dugout in this scenario, then we're required by rule to also restrict the head coach. Now, if the violation is egregious enough, it will result in ejections, but at a minimum, when penalizing for this, we're restricting both the assistant coach and the head coach. Case play number 7. Arguing balls and strikes under any circumstance is immediate grounds for an ejection. The correct answer here is false. Just because someone argues balls and strikes or says that you're missing a pitch, that doesn't result in an immediate ejection. Now, where this comes from is that people misinterpret a rule that's in the professional rules that says you can't leave your position to argue balls and strikes. Leaving your position means going from the dugout out to the field, leaving the batter's box to come argue with you, things of that nature. But certainly a coach in the dugout, more specifically a head coach, that is arguing a pitch with you, that's not an immediate violation resulting in an ejection. Instead, in those scenarios, we want to work through our progression of warning and restricting, trying to lead up and prevent them, but ultimately getting to an ejection. So there you have it, part 1 of our review of sportsmanship and ejections. If you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out our website at umpireclassroom.com. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the field.